Hello again, and welcome to our final panel of the day. At this point, we would like to introduce the speakers of our fourth panel, who will talk to us about what the role of the Greek and Cypriot diaspora is, and what kind of networking and connecting modalities must be developed for a successful innovation ecosystem. We start this panel with Mr. Bill Papastergiadis, who is a highly accomplished Australian construction lawyer who leads the Melbourne office of preeminent national law firm Murray and Angu, and for many years has served as the president of one of the largest Greek communities in the global Greek diaspora. Welcome, Bill, and thank you for staying awake at 2 a.m.
Thank you, Dimitri. It's my pleasure.
So next we have Mr. Eddie Zemenides, who is the Executive Director of the Hellenic American Leadership Council, a national Greek American advocacy organization. Mr. Eddie Zemenides is also in the leadership circles of the Chicago Council on Global Affairs, where he is one of the Emerging Leaders Fellows.
Unfortunately, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Cyprus, Dr. Nikos Christodoulides, is unable to join us at our symposium today, but we are delighted to welcome Ms. Irene Georgalla, the Head of Economic Affairs, to address the symposium in place of Minister Christodoulides.
So Mr. Andreas Katsaniotis would be our next speaker, but he was unable, could not be with us today and has addressed the symposium in writing, so we'll share his message. So Mr. Andreas Katsaniotis is a Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs in charge of diaspora Greeks. He was elected chairman of the Special Permanent Committee on Research and Technology of the Hellenic Parliament and managing director of the Hellenic Export Promotion Organization. And he also serves as the Secretary General of Information and Communication in charge of public diplomacy. So the moderator of this session is Mr. Antonis Kamaras, who is a research associate at the Hellenic Foundation for European and Foreign Policy, ELIAMEP, country coordinator of CSOCS, Southeast European Studies at Oxford University Greek Diaspora Project, and research officer at the Hellenic Observatory LSE. So I'm passing on to you, Mr. Kamaras, so you can start this session.
Hello. Yes. Can you? Yeah. Right. Well, we have with us today. I think the most important thing we'll discuss is how diaspora organizations can mobilize in advocacy of the Greek scientific diaspora's engagement with Greece. I think we will all agree that the repurposing of the Greek economy after the fiscal crisis that lasted for 10 years, and Cyprus had similar problems, must be knowledge-based. And the question is how we can mobilize the incredible scientific capital that the country has outside its borders, whether it's first, second, third, or fourth generation, in the construction of the a more international competitive Greek economy, and that's what we'll all be discussing with our participants in our panel right now. And I don't know who will be starting with our panel conversation.
So we could start with the message of Mr. Katsaniotis, who is his recorded talk. So if you agree with that, okay.
Sure.
Honor and pleasure to be given the opportunity to address such a distinguished audience. Our diaspora is a major national asset, both for Greece and Cyprus, which, by means of a two-way process and equal basis relationship, we have to recognize and promote. The homogenia is part of our national understanding, and now, more than ever, we have the technological and other means to establish and maintain a connection and a dialogue, almost on an individual level. Each and every Hellene in every corner on the earth can be an ambassador for issues that concern our countries, for issues that shape the present and determine the future. They can be, and actually already are, shaping local public opinion. It is well known that especially the younger generations have a strong presence in the social, scientific, economic and political life of the countries in which they live. With their participation in public affairs, they already have become our ambassadors and regulatory factors in the political scene and public domain of their countries. Hellenism worldwide is active and creative, and does not cease, no matter how far away it is, to maintain and strengthen the feeling of national unity. In these rather challenging times, due both to the pandemic and the international economic turmoil, it is particularly encouraging to see that the diaspora sends messages of solidarity and support to the national effort. But it's not only their solidarity our two countries do profit from, but also their role in the economic activity in both directions. One of the major issues in the midst of the crisis is the openness of the economy and the Greek market. In this direction, promotion of relationships with ecumenical Hellenism should be a focal point of economic development. The trend observed in the past years of the economic crisis, that is, a flow of highly qualified persons from Greece to the traditional destinations of the past in search of better working conditions, the well-known brain drain, has hit our country hard. Now, in the midst of another great crisis, that of the pandemic, the goal is to reverse this tendency, that is, to have a brain gain, which aims to attract, by means of incentives, for the Greek labour market specialized scientists working abroad. It is not at all impossible for our country to become a destination that attracts not only Greeks from abroad, but also foreign skilled potential, creating thus more jobs and financial growth. Our aspiration, and especially the version of Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis, is to make Greece an attractive centre, a hub for logistics, innovation, new technologies, biopharmaceutical research and development, etc. A sharp rise in the last year in foreign investments, some of them only very recently in these fields, proves that we can create a next day for the Greek economy. Of course, when we talk of reaching out to Greeks abroad, preserving the national identity is a key point and maybe also the most challenging of all projects. It is imperative that, even with limited resources that we have, we focus on connecting through the right means with the younger generations. The differences between the first expatriate associations of the previous decades and today are immense. In the first immigrant decades of the last century, we had migrations of unskilled staff, rural population, but also craftsmen who met the growing demand for labor in industrial centers. During the last decade, however, there are other requirements or other opportunities, and therefore a different kind of immigration has taken place. Increased educational level, professionalism and specialization are closely connected to the use of social media and faster information flow thanks to technology. As an immediate result, we witness a transformation of the traditional type and mission of organization of expatriate Hellenism to which we need to adapt too. At the same time, this new form of networking of Greeks abroad, with emphasis points on high education level, artistic creativeness and specialization, changes the image that foreigners had of our compatriots. From the image of the unskilled worker of the 60s and 70s, we passed to the time when Hellenism actively participates in the social, political, financial and cultural events of the foreign country. Thus, expatriate MPs, ministers, mayors, regional governors, councillors, university professors, artists, doctors, lawyers, engineers contribute to raising the standard of living not only of themselves, but also of their fellow citizens abroad. Their integration in their local communities adds the status of ambassador of Hellenism. They have the ability to influence opinions and currents, when required, at national, federal, state or even borough level, or in their areas of university activities, education and culture. One last point I would like to make about our very successful joining of forces. With the aim to strengthen peace and stability in our neighbourhood and the wider region of the Eastern Mediterranean, we have formed, together with Cyprus, constantly developing tripartite cooperation schemes in the field of diaspora, starting with Egypt and Israel, and in the near future also with other countries. Our common projects, which emanate from this operation, are indicative of the dynamics that our countries can and should develop, and the immediate contribution that have with regard of promoting stability and security in this region. They are also indicative of the effectiveness of soft power within international relations, as well as in issues such as our country's relationship with their diaspora. Thank you.
Okay, so now we can move on to the live talks, and next we could hear the message of Minister Nikos Christodoulides through Mrs. Georgalla.
Thank you very much. Good evening and good morning for those who are the day still morning. Allow me firstly to convey the warm greetings of the Minister and also his apologies for not being able to join this distinguished panel. So I will now proceed with reading the Minister's message. Distinguished co-panelists, dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure to be addressing the second Greek Scientist Society Symposium, and an even greater one to be participating in this specific panel, which explores the ways in which the Greek and Cypriot diaspora promote and upgrade our innovation ecosystem. Before delving into the topic, I would like to thank Mr. Theo Zacharis and his team for organizing this timely discussion. It is very important to bring together representatives of the diaspora, academia, and the government who can give different perspectives of the topic in question and enrich the exchange of views. Ladies and gentlemen, our world, our people, and our economies are deeply interconnected and interdependent. And as today's organization proves, most people are just a few clicks away from each other. Now more than ever, it is imperative to deepen and strengthen the links with our diaspora, not in a quid pro quo manner, but in that of mutual empowerment. As multiple examples indicate, the diaspora can contribute skills, expertise, contacts, ideas, and capital to their home countries to support creative, generally export-oriented projects. For the sake of our discussion, it is important to acknowledge that migration is inherently linked with progress and innovation, which is often an indication of the successful integration of our expatriates in their host countries. To make this point, let me only refer to some important innovators, members of the world diaspora who impacted the world we live in today. Marie Curie was a Pole in France. Albert Einstein was a German in the US. Nikola Tesla, futurist and inventor, was a Serb in the US. In fact, a recent study by the National Foundation for American Policy has shown that since 1901, immigrants have been awarded 35% of the Nobel Prizes won by Americans in chemistry, medicine, and physics. Cyprus has a large diaspora population in the United Kingdom, in Australia, United States, South Africa, and most corners of the world, which includes researchers and innovators. They excel in their work in their host countries and bring pride to our country. To name a few, pioneer of fetal medicine, Professor Kypros Nikolaidis, astrophysicist Artemis Spirou, and DeepMind CEO Demis Hassabis. Cyprus's history of migration and large diaspora has led to the shaping of a political and institutional framework that keeps diaspora issues at its heart. Through this framework, we strive to acknowledge and show our appreciation for the invaluable contribution of our diaspora, while at the same time, we follow closely its progress and successes, and we implement mechanisms to address their needs. First and foremost, the government has a dedicated presidential commissioner responsible for diaspora matters, who inter alia organizes and hosts a number of educational and hospitality programs for the diaspora youth. He is also responsible for hosting the annual World Diaspora Conference, where our expatriates and their institutions from around the globe come together to discuss matters of common interest and exchange knowledge and ideas. The Commissioner is also promoting collaboration on diaspora affairs through its bilateral and trilateral cooperation mechanisms with Greece by exploring synergies with corresponding diaspora management authorities at the highest level, among others in Egypt, Lebanon, and so forth. Last but not least, I would like to mention that for second or third generation diaspora members, we have established a mainstream mechanism through which to claim Cypriot citizenship and gain access to a plethora of support measures. At the level of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we prioritize engaging with the diaspora on a regular basis through our increasing number of consuls and honorary consuls which are appointed in countries with Cypriot communities. Turning now to the activities that concern the researchers and innovators of the Cypriot diaspora specifically, I would like to point out that our ministry's recently adopted economic diplomacy strategy places particular emphasis on actions to create and strengthen communication and cooperation with them. In this respect, since 2019, we have been organizing regular events in Athens and London, with the most recent one taking place this past September in Athens, pertaining to innovative university research. Furthermore, the Research and Innovation Foundation of Cyprus maintains a central database of expatriate Cypriot researchers and innovators and provides them with information on activities, available funding, and networking opportunities in the research and innovation sectors in Cyprus. Ladies and gentlemen, before concluding, allow me to note that while it is always important to maintain the attraction of our diaspora back to the homeland as a top priority, aiming to the return of talent and reversing the brain drain in our economies, at the same time, strengthening ties with those who remain abroad can also be beneficial. Nowadays, the use of technologies has further enabled communication and instant sharing of information. Cypriots of the diaspora often contribute to the development of our domestic innovation ecosystem by providing expertise. Many of them offer mentoring to startups through specialized programs. Others provide financial support and investments in the country, while also acting as valuable ambassadors of Cyprus, promoting its values and culture and raising awareness about the country's contribution in the scientific, academic, economic, and political world scene. For all these reasons, as government and as a country, we are deeply grateful and proud for the contribution of our diaspora in further developing the innovation ecosystem of Cyprus, and despite the physical distance, our priority is to keep them as close to home as possible, offering opportunities for cooperation. Thank you for your attention.
Father, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
I cannot hear you for some reason. I'm really sorry about that.
Can you hear us now, Antonis?
We can hear you, Mr. Kamaras. Maybe, can you hear us?
I'm sorry, I cannot hear you. I wonder what I need to do, but
Okay, until you resolve the issue, we can move on with the talks of the other speakers. Maybe Mr. Papastergiadis, if he's okay with that.
Thank you, Christodoulides, and thank you for the opportunity today to present to a broad collection of people globally and connecting us in a way which, is an important part of not only the future of Greece, but importantly, the future of Greece globally. Because one of the things that we're working on here in Australia is understanding the fact that we are interconnected, but that Greece at the moment does lack the infrastructure to be able to properly connect us in the appropriate form. We've discussed in many of these types of panels historically what is needed to be able to bring together the strengths that we all exhibit in our own particular localities, and to ensure that those strengths are affected within Greece, but also amongst us in the diaspora. And one of the key things in terms of developing that infrastructure, in my humble opinion, relates to the need to create a ministry for the Greeks abroad. I mean, as we know, there are almost 6 million Greeks abroad, over 500,000 left during the crisis, the economic crisis in recent times. We are at the crossroads in the Omogenia in terms of what we in fact look like as an Omogenia, as a diaspora. And what do I mean by that? I mean that the first wave of migration to Australia, which took place in the 50s and 60s, that generation is unfortunately leaving us as we speak, and been leaving us at a very quick rate at this point in time. The second and third generations, who have a very different look about them in terms of, and what do I mean by that? The first generation, 85%, were largely either illiterate or hadn't completed primary school, while the second and third generations are highly educated, highly skilled, and almost 65% are tertiary educated, that is, at university level. However, the main organisations that have been set up by the first generation to cater to the Greek community here in Australia are largely coming to an end because they were predominantly Adelphotites and brotherhoods that reflected their origin, in other words, where they grew up in Greece. Now, those topiki organismi don't have the relevance to the second and third and fourth generation because the people born in Australia see themselves as Hellenes rather than as simply coming from a particular aspect of Greece. So going from 250, 260 organisations some 20 years ago, you could now say there is 8 organisations in Melbourne that play a leading role, and that's replicated throughout Australia. So we have a changing landscape, and now is the time for us to really make the next step in terms of making sure we energise what is taking place in the diaspora, the new form upon which it looks and operates, and connect that with an appropriately resourced Greek infrastructure. Because, I mean, the reality is, and it was spoken about a moment ago, about who is winning, for example, Nobel laureates in the United States, and it's predominantly immigrants. May I say the same thing is happening in Australia in terms of who is generating the change. The Greek community of Melbourne, for example, as an organisation, has deep links with government, industry, university. What do I mean by that? We were now funded by the federal government of Australia to set up a global research centre at the University of Melbourne, one of the world's top 20 universities, which will be a Hellenic diaspora studies to the tune of $5 million. That's at a tertiary level. From a government perspective, in terms of playing a pivotal role influencing foreign affairs, we've worked with the Australian government here to issue direct messages supporting Greece on a variety of foreign policy issues in recent times, including the Eastern Mediterranean, and also in the past relating to the Macedonian issue as well. And then importantly, the government here, recognising the strength and collaboration of the community here, has continued to fund our programs, whether it was educational, as I indicated, with the University of Melbourne, the diaspora studies, or whether it's, for example, from an infrastructure perspective, $4 million towards the construction of our 15-storey cultural centre here in Melbourne, $5 million towards a new centre in Melbourne which caters to the youth, constructing the Parthenon, replicas of the Parthenon marbles adjoining the outside of our cultural centre here in Melbourne, again funded by the government here. And as part of all of that, and as I've indicated, building the infrastructure, we ourselves have promised and offered to the Greek government to set up an office for EOT, the Ministry of Tourism here in Melbourne, an office for Enterprise Greece, all funded by us in the Greek community of Melbourne, but ways to build those direct relationships, because we can't talk about how important the diaspora is unless we have concrete examples of relationships that work both ways, and which unite us all, in particular on the issue of vote. But perhaps as an opening statement, I might leave it there.
Okay, I'm back in business, and I'm terribly sorry about that. Can you all hear me now?
Yes, we can.
That's great. So I think the floor is to goes to Mr. Zemenides, right?
Thank you, Mr. Kamaras. And you know, it is a pleasure to be with you all today, only because we're at a time in history that science is more important than ever, and we really have a battle worldwide versus those who don't believe in science, whether it comes to climate change or COVID, and we've seen the effect that those people have, and those who do believe in science, and whether it's in reviving Hellenism or Greece or Cyprus's economy or even our own communities, I think the role of Greek scientists in Greece and Cyprus in the diaspora is more important than ever. And this is why, and I kind of have a reputation for saying controversial things, so I'll start with this. Let's look at an image from this weekend. Albert Bourla was, and I'm sorry, I think somebody has a lot of bounce back. So, Bill, I think it may be coming from you. If you could put you on mute. Yeah, and he was being honored at the Archons event for the Ecumenical Patriarchate. And there were obviously a lot of rich, successful Greek Americans there. But Bourla was CEO of Pfizer for a long time. He had been working on mRNA for a long time and actually arranging to go into Greece even before COVID. And this image just reminds me of who we value as Hellenism, and we don't value scientists properly. They don't have their proper place at the panel. And at a risk of getting myself in hot water with the deputy minister, I think he should have at least done a videotape greetings for this session, because he was in New York for all this. If our scientists, we can make all the platitudes we want for Greek investment and brain gain and investing in this knowledge base and these amazing Greek scientists that we have worldwide. But if they remain at the level of platitudes, then, we're wasting our time. I do appreciate the deputy minister. I do appreciate what the foreign minister said about coordination with the diaspora. And I want to tie this to Bill's points about making a proper infrastructure. I will tell you this, since it has been, Antonis raised this about following the model of the effectiveness in terms of ethnic issues and national issues that we have in Washington and elsewhere. That doesn't happen through the diaspora ministers. That happens because the foreign ministry directly through its embassy talks to the most active political activists in the United States, or the defense ministry, or the diplomatic advisors of the presidents. And that lesson, that's something that we can learn from in terms of setting up an infrastructure. Maybe it's not a ministry of diaspora affairs. The Ministry of Diaspora Affairs can deal with other things, but maybe it's Minister Georgiadis' ministry having specifically someone to deal with innovators. Minister Perakakis' the Ministry of Education to help research. The fact is, we need to get out of a paradigm. If we are engaging in this conversation only so we can make adjustments, slight adjustments in stuff we are already doing, then again, we're wasting our time. There has to be a firm reset, a firm rethink, and it has to start with valuing our scientists a little more than we do as a global Hellenic community. We don't. We value, above all, people with economic power, people with political power, without realizing that the scientists can get to both of those places very quickly. But we have to invest early on. And this conversation kind of reminds me of a little joke that we have here about the first Greek American president getting sworn in and next to his mom and saying, you must be proud of your son. He was a successful attorney, and he was in the military, and he was a great senator, and now he's the first president of the United States. And the mom says, yeah, he's okay, but you should meet his brother. He's a doctor, right? And if we can, value our PhDs and our innovators the same way, I think we can take the next step. But hopefully, I've given enough food for thought, and I'll take the rest in Q&A.
I wanted to, if I may, ask a question to both Mrs. Zemenides and Mrs. Papastergiadis. how would you see your organizations connecting with the scientific, the scientific communities? Because they're a different type of animal than, your very successful real estate investors, bankers, manufacturers. They exist in a different social milieu in universities. How do you see organizations connecting with these different diaspora, very distinct diaspora cohorts?
Endy, would you like to go first, or are you happy for me to proceed?
Sure, I'll go. First of all, I don't think they're that different, and I will tell you kind of our model. We do have scientists. We do have people from the STEM world that are part of health, and what we do is we actually try, as we handle different issues and establish relationships with policymakers. So, for example, if we have someone on the Science and Technology Committee in Congress that we're trying to establish a relationship with, we tend to take a Greek American scientist and make him part of, or her part of the team that is dealing with said individual. We have a lot of people who are especially in the computer sciences and the renewable energy sciences, but I think we've shown that there's ways to engage people. You got to engage them on their interests, and not just generally throw out, oh well, you're Greek, be involved in the Greek community. I also think one thing that we haven't done enough of, not only our group, but the diaspora in general, is recognize the need for funding for some of these scientists. Every Hellenic Bar Association, Bill and I are both lawyers, but every Hellenic Bar Association, there are just unbelievable amount of scholarships out there for Greeks in the diaspora that want to become lawyers, for example. And I will tell you, in a couple of weeks, there will be a bar association event where they're handing out $10,000 scholarships. There is no one in America that's not going to go to law school over $10,000. But there are people who, may choose to pursue a PhD in the hard sciences if you give them the economic ability to do so instead of going straight to work. There are people who may produce some type of research if we get them a grant to do so. So one, I think we give, so the short answer to sum up my answer to your question is, one, we give scientists a place at the table where they don't just act like a Greek, but where they can bring their scientific expertise to the fore, even if it's just to build a relationship. And two, to put, again, a theme that Bill raised, put some resources behind to encourage scientific scholarship and study.
I think Eddie made some excellent points there, and I agree entirely. The mapping here within Australia of people of Greek background who are scientists has not been undertaken. Like Endy, we have dedicated groups in law, in medicine, but as medical doctors per se rather than scientists, etc., who are well organised and who organise conferences. In fact, we're organising the global Hellenic Medical Conference here in the Kinotita at Melbourne, at the Greek community of Melbourne, next year with the Governor Patoulis. That'll be held here. But that's more from a medical perspective rather than the pure science that I believe you're interested in. So I think it goes back to the question about where we have a more direct link with Greece in terms of how we can properly map what our skills are, how we can then invest after we've mapped that out, and to ensure that the platforms are there for us to create the relevant synergies. Melbourne is one of the top 3-4 scientific hubs globally. It has so many research centres here. For example, AstraZeneca was being produced here in Melbourne and for a lot of the Southeast Asia. So the opportunities are immense, but the foundational work for us to be able to understand the area of science from a Hellenic perspective and then to build the platforms is quite immature at the moment.
If I may build on that, I want to ask you, how do you see yourselves as organizations engaging on advocacy, not only in Australia and the United States respectively, but also in Greece itself? And I say that because, the scientific enterprise is inherently cross-border. And when we're talking about the scientific and the resident Greek diaspora, we're talking about the possibility of generating wealth across borders. In a way, we're talking about a Greek commonwealth that encompasses both Greece itself and significant diaspora communities. So together with the vote, but not only because of the vote, but it's also because the opportunities for wealth generation are inherently cross-border, particularly when we have science involved. So that makes it both legitimate and necessary, possibly, for organizations such as yours to advocate also in Greece itself on how this interaction can be, fully exploited. Do you see a strategy for organizations in that direction?
Look, there is no doubt, Antonis, that we have the ability to develop strong relationships here in Australia and in Greece. To give you some small examples, during the COVID crisis, I picked up the phone, spoke with the Federal Health Minister and agreed with him to set up vaccine hubs in our church halls, which we had one running this weekend again here in Melbourne. We're at almost 93% in terms of single dose and well over 80% in double dose. As one small example in terms of how we can play an important role in the science area. And the minister picked up the phone immediately, agreed with the process and funded it completely from the start. Equally, in terms of, for example, setting up an agreement between Greece and Australia on double taxation, picked up the phone, spoke with the Federal Treasurer, that is the Minister of Finance here in Melbourne, in Australia, and said, Greece is one of the few countries that doesn't actually have a double taxation agreement with Greece. We've got it with all of Europe, but we don't have it with Greece. So someone who invests from Australia into Greece is taxed not only in Greece, but when they bring their money back here, are taxed as well here in Australia. In other words, taxed twice. And the biggest form of investment in recent history, and in fact in the history of Greece, has come out of Australia through the Macquarie Bank in the investment in Endy. And that was only recently, but there is a huge disinterest in doing so. Again, as a result of a quick phone call, that process has been set forward, and hopefully in 2020, told in 2022, negotiations are starting to be completed in 2023. There isn't a hurdle. I don't find any arrogance at all in dealing with any of the ministers in Greece. They do pick up the phones, they are quick to respond, and they are interested on the whole. So there isn't a problem there. Where the problem really sits, from my perspective, is the capacity to take an idea and turn it into something. One of the easiest ways for us to fund a lot of the activities we're talking about is through the pension scheme here in Australia. Australia has the third largest pension scheme, superannuation scheme globally. It's in the trillions of dollars. We advised and spoke with one of the former finance ministers of Greece about setting up an office here in Australia for Enterprise Greece, such that we could create direct linkages and understandings here on the ground about what's needed in Greece and vice versa from an investment perspective. Tap into the money that's here. Spoken about in Parliament, agreed, offered our space at the Greek community of Melbourne, hasn't happened. Same with the tourist office, hasn't happened despite being agreed. And that really is unfortunately the story. And I finished with the last story, which is there wasn't also a tourist working visa agreement between Greece and Australia, despite the fact that Australia had such an agreement with almost all of Europe, including Turkey. Passed after our contact with the immigration minister here, that is giving people the opportunity to work in both countries for 2 years and have full access to all the benefits. Passed here in 2011 after a quick meeting that we had with the Minister of Immigration. Passed in Greece in 2019, 8 years later. We need quick, prompt response that deals with the inherent bureaucracy in Greece. But the appetite and the interest is here.
Eddie?
So I have probably a more uniquely American suggestion that stems from a lot of the work. Bill, I think I'm getting a lot of bounce back from yours. Sorry. That stems specifically from the trilateral and the 3+1, the Greece, Cyprus, Israel plus a United States process. Now, this could be turned into a model. For example, our Australian brothers have tremendous political presence, and maybe they can get something that's akin to Senator Menendez and Congressman Bilirakis' Eastern Mediterranean Security and Energy Partnership Act, which everybody paid attention to a lot of the kind of military aspects of that law, like lifting the Cyprus arms embargo or selling military hardware to Greece. But in there, maybe the most important directive was Congress telling the executive branch that they had to engage more diplomatically in the 3+1. And this year, in that 3+1, technical committees have started, and almost all of it, virtually none of it, is on what you would consider traditional diplomacy and military and security. And each group is actually dealing with items of science. Cyprus, I think, has the blue economy, if I'm correct, Irene. Israel is talking about alternative proteins. Greece, innovation. The U.S., an innovation economy. The U.S. on green energy. Now, given that model, here's a really simple takeaway. Since we're engaged as a diaspora, we were engaged, first of all, in conceiving this cooperation, putting it into law, and we're constantly talking to them. A very easy takeaway for this Greek society, this Greek scientist society, is you should create a public affairs committee, and I will make sure, at least on the American end, that you're always at the table, because I guarantee you, you can contribute both from the American end and the Greek end and the Cypriot end, as the Israelis are mobilizing their Israeli scientists here in the United States. And you can make a difference, because this 3+1 technical cooperation has expanded. It was part of the strategic dialogue, the third strategic dialogue that Minister Dendias just had. Secretary General Corneliou was just in the United States talking about this exactly. Minister Christodoulides is probably going to come by the end of the year talking about this exactly. So all these conversations are happening, and they're happening with people who are politically astute. But if you came up with a public affairs division, I'll make sure you're at the table, and I think that's the model that we can follow.
If I may ask, how the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Cyprus looks at these trilateral possibilities. What is the strategy of the Republic in terms of, activating the partnership between diaspora associations, the Greek Cypriot or Greek scientific community, and the homeland?
Yes, thank you. Actually, I'm very glad that this issue of 3+1 came up, because it is a very, let's say, timely one. Only at the beginning of this week, we had the very first meeting at technical level committee, which was organized this time by Israel. And we and our scientific community here in Cyprus had the opportunity to learn and exchange practices with the Israeli community on alternative protein. So, but indeed, and I'm very happy to listen to the suggestion, and it is a great idea that we should involve the diaspora in this kind of mechanism as well. And I have to admit that this is not something that we had considered so far, at least. And I think that it is an excellent idea, and it is exactly the forum to promote this kind of cooperation, because our researchers, our diaspora researchers and innovators are in fact perhaps the most, let's say, pertinent persons to make this link between the countries that we want to involve in this 3+1 mechanism. So yes, indeed, and just I would like also to confirm that indeed the Cyprus side will be presenting something on the side of the blue economy in this dialogue. But I would like to point out that Deputy Minister for Shipping has recently launched a new strategy on shipping, and indeed he wants to integrate innovation in the sector and new technologies in the sector, aiming to ensure sustainability. So I believe that even though the topic doesn't look from the first, let's say, glance that is related to research and innovation, in the case of blue economy, I think that with the new approach of the Deputy Minister of Shipping of Cyprus, this is very much the case. So I would support this view that indeed we need to engage the diaspora in this dialogue.
All right, I would like to revert to something that Bill said about, which is very much of an issue, of course, as we all know, of state capacity. And I was wondering whether, and I want again to address this question both to Bill and Eddie. And I know from my study on diaspora homeland relations that there are lots of actors in Greece which are keen to ally with diaspora actors in order to effect change in Greece, because they recognize that within the diaspora, there are great pools of money, expertise, and values, right? I mean, these are the three great pools of assets that the diaspora has for Greece. On the other hand, these resident Greek actors, they have the field presence that the diaspora may need to effect change and advocate for change in Greece. And I'm just wondering whether your organizations have considered partnering with civil society actors or business associations, not only with the state, with the ministries, which I'm very glad to hear that they're open to your advocacy and your ideas, but also to non-state actors who in alliance with you can produce change that much more effectively.
Well, we do actually have already examples that we can point to. Greece has now, and we take it for granted, but it goes back to the origin story. Greece has now is hot on the movie scene, right? But that actually happened because of the diaspora. There is a studio that a Canadian family, the Merkopoulos family, Cinespace Studios, that also has a studio in Chicago, which just recently became the biggest studio in the United States, even bigger than California. It helps that there are so many TV shows now that are Chicago PD and Chicago Fire and this, but Transformers and Batman and Superman were all, and the Divergent films were all filmed here too. But the former patriarch of the family, who has since passed, he had a dream of going to Greece, and he went and he saw a lot of the problems that Bill put out there, but he partnered with the government, with non-state actors. They changed, frankly, started during Syriza. They changed the laws. They kept giving suggestions, and now you're having a kind of a renaissance of sorts. of sorts. You saw the diaspora do kind of the same just now with the recent medical cannabis law. Some of the biggest innovators in the medical cannabis industry are diaspora Greeks. You're seeing it with some of the green energy. There's a company who 10 years ago, the biggest privately owned generator of energy in the United States, Invenergy, went maybe 15 years ago to Greece, had a horrible experience, said, we're never coming back. There were two young Greek men, like in their late 20s, who started working at Advocacy. They're no longer there, but kept haranguing them. You got to go back to Greece. You got to go back to Greece. And it was simply, going back to this, let's build relationships. The owner of this company is Ukrainian. They arranged these two young guys through me, arranged for Ambassador Pyatt to visit this company. The owner of the company really wanted to meet Ambassador Pyatt because of his experience as U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine. And all of a sudden, he changed his mind about going to Greece. And now Invenergy is in Greece. So it's a two-way conversation. And what we really have to shift the paradigm is not just find, because I think this was for a long time the Greek model. Let's find a rich Greek diaspora person to invest in Greece. No. Yes, you can. That's part of the equation, but find the people. Bill may have clients as a successful construction lawyer. There are people right now in the real estate industry in Chicago who don't want to invest in Chicago anymore. Right? Bill may have clients who are like, I'm done in Australia. I'm looking to go somewhere else. Get the Rolodex. Don't ask Bill just for the money in his pocket. Ask him, more importantly, for his Rolodex. Those are the people, their connections, their ability to connect the dots. That's how we can draw more investment activity into Greece and Cyprus.
Bill?
Oh, look, I agree entirely with Eddie. It's all about connecting the dots, and that's where the work needs to be done. At the moment, that work is not being done, in my humble opinion. The Greek state hasn't properly mapped out the diaspora. It hasn't explained the possibilities. It makes it impossible to get a passport. In Australia, and I'm sure in the United States, we can do it all online immediately. With Greece, it takes a 2-year process, and who knows where you're going to end up. You don't have the economic, ties between enterprises. Just to give you a small example, the trade relationship between Australia and Italy is well over 13 or 14 billion. The trade relationship between Greece and Australia is 300 million. So we're talking about a fraction. And what is that trade between Greece and Australia at the moment? It's on olive oil and feta. Now, that is an important part of Greece, but it is not the future of our conversation today, which is about science. So that's where the work needs to be done. We've got to set up the infrastructure at a state level, but equally, as Endy points out, we too can, if you ask us the right questions, point you in the right direction of the people who can assist. Immediately prior to COVID hitting, we'd organised with the government here, a trade commission that was going to go to the Thessaloniki trade fair in 2020. And there was a big conference being organised in Melbourne in March 2020 here at the Kinotita, the Greek community of Melbourne. It was cancelled at the last minute. We have a number of ministers and also being funded by our government. We are funded by our government because the government here understands the historical relationship, meaning we fought on the same side in a number of wars, the cultural relationship, and also the importance of the Greek community here to the fabric of our multicultural society in Australia. So there is so much goodwill that needs to be tapped in. How we do it requires a dedicated, I'm not sure about Eddie's view on this, but it does require a dedicated infrastructure within Greece to tap into us, because it's not happening. It's happening on an ad hoc basis without all of the intelligence. I mean, we've got a proxenio in Melbourne, unfortunately, a population of 300,000 Greeks in Melbourne, and we've got a proxenio with 5 people in it. I mean, it can't work that way, and it's dysfunctional. You're putting so much pressure on a select group of people who also probably aren't appropriately skilled in what we need them to do. So the appetite is here. Creating the infrastructure and the network to translate that appetite into action is what is now needed.
I'll follow up on that. I agree completely on the infrastructure. I think maybe the only point of disagreement, if it is how that infrastructure takes shape. But and I'm sure Bill will, since he's talking about consulates, here's a real simple thing. The trade officials, the trade counselors at almost every consulate are wholly inadequate for a 21st century Greece. They come, they go to every consulate, they're looking for somebody who's selling Greek olive oil or is going to sell feta cheese and all the rest. Yes, again, that's part of it. I'm not saying we're not going to do that. And Bill just said that's not what we're not going to abandon that. But they could not tell you, if you quiz the Greek consulate or the Cypriot consulate's officers to tell you who are the Greeks or the Cypriots or the Hellenes at the top innovators, who has the best Rolodex, they would not get it. If we do not fix that problem, we are wasting our time. If we are not investing in scientists, and you all know this, if we are not investing in scientists at the front end of the career, and then what happens? Oh, wow, the new president of the University of Chicago is a Greek scientist. Now everybody wants to get to him. Yes, he's going to be open. He's going to be helpful to people, but there are a lot of people who probably helped him in his career along the way. They have a claim to his time as well. So this mapping out is something that really should get to our should be a priority of Greek diplomacy. Whether that means you bring extra officials at the consulates, so be it. I would suggest that and I've seen this with the Israelis, since we're talking about 3+1, they have specific officials in different ministries who have served in the United States. I have to say, it's astounding to me sometimes, and people can take this any way they want. I mean it a little bit as an insult, that the ministries in both Cyprus and in Greece sometimes have people staffing the America desk who have never stepped in America. This is like I don't know if you guys will realize the Benny Hill show, where you're just running around to a goofy music. This is the good thing, the kind of positive on this is there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. And I think Bill,
if I may interject, I think that's why it's important to we have this highly valuable anecdotal evidence to be collated and be there in black and white. I mean, very important, critically important from if diaspora communities and organizations such as yours, if they can articulate their policy recommendations on how the relationship can be taken to a further level, and point out the institutional weaknesses, as you've just been doing right now. And there, I think you'll find many people willing to take up your cause in Greece itself. But we need to go to the next level. And as maybe, if I may suggest to, as I said in my earlier question, that maybe some of that very excellent advocacy that we're doing on behalf of Greece, in both with the Australian and the United States government, maybe it should also, be transported to Greece itself.
Was that a question?
Well, that's a.
This is a statement. I mean, because I was
statement. It's under
and everything he said.
Yeah, what I have seen in our own research at the Greek Diaspora Project is that our public discourse already is cross-border. I mean, you live through a newspaper like Zemenides, a third of its op-ed articles are written by eminent diaspora scientists, intellectuals, economists, what have you. So we're very accustomed to having the diaspora having a voice in our public affairs, but I think that voice should extend to the critical issue that you know best, people like you, Eddie and Bill, on how the relationship can be taken to the next level, and all these weaknesses that you have.
Well, universities can play a role there, Adoni. I mean, and
Yeah.
unfortunately, Greek universities haven't stepped up to the mark, and have and aren't at the level that a lot of the other global universities are. I mean, for example, with its rich history and culture, Greece should focus on its underutilized weapon in its armory, and that's education. That's what it should be doing. It's more important than tourism. In Australia, education is more important than tourism. It is a $32 billion industry. It's about $18 billion industry. In Melbourne alone, we have 700,000 international students with a population of 25 million people. 700,000, almost 1 million international students. There is no Greeks Abroad Research Centre in Greece. Not one. No one is looking at what's going on. There is very few agreements between Greek universities and universities here in Australia. I'll give you one small example. One university here in Melbourne, Monash University, has, I think, 24 agreements in Italy and France with different universities, not one with one Greek university. Where are the cultural offensives? Where's the Crete expatriate education program? It's now defunct. They got rid of it. So, these are the things that we need to work hard, and all of that involves science. Because when we're talking about university, it's the study of science. I mean, we're all involved in science in that regard. So we're doing some of that, and we're, I sit on the board of Melbourne University, so I've started the process there of trying to connect with Greece and have exchange programs between university. I'm sure Eddie's done a better job than we have, but unless we do it and we do it individually, it doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. And it's not enough to fall on individuals rather than the network that needs to be built.
Thank you, Bill. I don't know if Dr. Karponis, how are we time-wise? Do we have any questions from the from our audience that we could address, or before I give the floor to Eddie?
Yeah. Because we're the last panel, we have a little bit more time. We can still live on air for a few more minutes. It's a very interesting discussion, so I think we'll continue after that in the backstage. But we have a few more minutes.
Very good, Eddie. Again, I'm sorry for being being a bit persistent, but how do you think about advocating for the necessities and the parameters of the diaspora-homeland relationship in the homeland itself? How do you feel about taking this argument to Greece itself?
Maybe I wasn't clear enough, but I think Irene and I put this out. There is a mechanism right now, right? There's a mechanism that fits in not only to the goal of this conference, but it's a mechanism that exists in U.S. policy, in Cypriot policy, in Cypriot government, in the Greek government. And the fact is, let's bring the scientific community to the table in this mechanism, in this 3+1 mechanism, because that 3+1 mechanism is resourced. There's political will behind it. This also requires something from the scientific community, right? You're going to have to, and again, herein lies my suggestion to you all: create a public policy committee, right? And we will, and I said I will. Irene already said on behalf of Minister Christodoulides, and I know he will, and I'm sure Minister Dendias will be very much into it. We will bring the scientists to the table in this mechanism. If this mechanism works, right, the 3+1, I think, is one of the most highly visible and most highly appreciated diplomatic mechanisms in both Athens and Nicosia. Correct me if you think I'm wrong, Irene, but I think, I know a lot of the attention has been the France deal, but over the last decade, there is nothing like, our relationships with Israel and the United States, right? The fact that we have this mechanism, we have this opening, and right now this mechanism is not concentrating on frigates or F-35s, or it's concentrating specifically on matters of science. This is where we should concentrate. And it will be something, at least in the United States, it will be something that Senator Menendez will pay attention to, and Congressman Bilirakis and Secretary Blinken, because everybody's eyes are on this mechanism, and that's where I would focus.
So let me give you maybe the last word to Irene from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Yes, thank you. I'll just confirm what Eddie said, because indeed this is a highly political, let's say, forum of discussion, and it is engaged on issues other than security, and it goes deep into economic and academic, scientific issues. So I think what we are missing is this link with our diaspora scientists that could participate in these communities. Because, for example, from our case, I know that we have the links internally to Cyprus to reach out to the scientific community and, the startups and so on, but we're actually missing these links when it comes to our diaspora abroad. So this indeed would be a very useful tool for us. And also going back with this suggestion to the minister, I'm sure we will also explore ways in order to tackle this challenge.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Georgalla. So that brings our panel to a close. I would like to thank Mr. Kamaras for moderating a very insightful discussion and for incorporating the twist with the Greek actors. I would like to extend our thank you to our ministers, Minister Katsaniotis, for the positive message of unity, reminding us of the progress that the Greek diaspora has made along the years, and Mr. Georgalla for delivering Minister Christodoulides' message on sharing examples of pioneering role models of the Greek and Cypriot diaspora and beyond, and for welcoming Hellenes and Cypriots back home. Mr. Papastergiadis, thank you for really providing perspective to our discussions today by detailing the characteristics of the different generations of the Greek diaspora. We are very proud of the philanthropic initiatives of the Greek diaspora in Melbourne, which serve as an example worldwide, and of course the Hellenes in Australia. And Mr. Zemenides, thank you very much for bringing to life the story of Albert Goulart in the beginning to illustrate a very important point, that we don't value our scientists. We don't give them the attention they deserve, and certainly platitudes only go so far, and they're certainly not enough to achieve the ecosystem 5.0 to which we strive for today. So thank you, everyone. And I'm afraid that the time has come to draw the symposium to an end. We leave optimistic on the future ahead, but now, more than ever, cognizant that progress does not come without action. A 5.0 ecosystem will not develop by itself. It is in our hands to improve education, facilitate innovation, and advocate for investments to facilitate this drive. So thank you everyone for joining us today and making this exchange of ideas possible. We would like to thank Mr. Theophanis Zacharis for organizing this connection of all Greek scientists in Greece, Cyprus, and of course, the diaspora. Special thank you to our erudite panelists for the day and our skillful moderators for this discussion.
We look forward to seeing you in the next Greek Scientist Society Symposium. So please stay tuned and continue to support our initiative.